is get ourselves, we're going to make sure we're familiar with who's in the room, right? We want to make, this is about building our power, building our connections. There's a few different groups in the room. We want to make sure we're clear. A few different housing communities in the room. We're going to hear from a couple people who are speaking to the issues that we care about today. Saving public housing, repairing public housing, housing for the homeless, dignity and respect, housing as a human right. And then we're going to talk just briefly about what is our plan today. Okay, there is a hearing for the DC Housing Authority. It hasn't started quite yet, and the way the timing works, sometimes it's hard to figure out exactly what time they're starting. But we want to have a presence in that room. Very strong presence. This is a very strong presence. We might discuss also, possibly, based on timing, making an appearance in the Human Services hearing, which is happening on the 5th floor, because they're talking about homeless services, and they need to be linking that with public housing too, right? So I want you all to start thinking about that, but we're going to talk about it in a minute. Now, the first thing that I want to do, I know it's a little chaotic. Okay, folks, I'm sorry. We have a sign-in sheet. Make sure you sign in so we can stay in touch with you. We have a fact sheet going around, and I hope everybody was able to get a bag lunch. Reverend Graylin Hagler is here from Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ, and he's going to just sort of get us started with a blessing for the work that we're doing here today. So I want to turn it over to Graylin Hagler.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
It's so good that all of you have come out here in the rain and the chill of the day. Yeah. But you're here, right? You're here because we're here to make certain that folk down here who supposedly represent us know that we think something, we know something, we're about something, and we mean to do something to make folk hear us. And so that's why it's important that we're all here together, because only we can make the change. Only we can bring the truth. Only we can begin to open up doors so that people can see and understand what the picture should look like. Right. Because one thing is certain is that housing is a human right. It's a human right. Sure. And that the city has to make a commitment to making sure that everybody has a roof over their head. Amen. Not just a roof over their head, but a decent roof over their head. And not only a decent roof over their head, but a community that becomes our community with which to live and with which to raise a family, with which to feel secure, that folks just can't move us out at whim, but we are able to stay rooted in the community that we belong to. That's what we're about today. We're here today to make it known that we got strength, and that strength is people strength. That strength is also a soul strength. That strength comes from our heart and the core of our being, and we aim to be heard, and we aim to be respected. We will not be denied any longer. That's what we're standing here for. That's what we've come through the rain for, to make sure that folk understand that we're about what we're about, and what we're about is as serious as anything else is in this city. You know, the one thing that always disturbs everybody is that, you know, when it comes down to this political leadership, we know that there's lobbyists that walk around here with bags of money, and they can walk in and talk to any council member at will. But somehow when the people who vote show up, the doors are closed. You've got to go through a whole lot of apparatus in order to sit down and have a meeting with somebody that's an elected servant. I'm going to use that word, servant. Servant means that you serve the people. Servant means that you serve the people who brought you to office. Service means that you care about everybody, and particularly everybody who are continuing to struggle for housing and dignity and right. And so one of the things as we prepare today, I want to just have us sort of center down and come into that place where we draw up that spiritual force, that spiritual power within us. And I'm a Christian minister, but I also understand that people come from different faith traditions. And I also understand this. It's about the same spirit. Right? We may call it by different names, right? But it's the same thing, right? We're going in the same direction, right? It's the same thing that breathed life into us, and therefore, whether we call whatever we call our higher power, we know who it is, but we know also that it's a power that unifies us and does not divide. That's right. Let us join in a moment of meditation and spiritual practice. Amen. All that is right, all that is holy, all that is about justice, we ask that you enter into us and fill us. Fill us with a power and fill us with an enthusiasm for justice and for what's right. Yes. Allow us to be truly your prophets. Yes. Yes. Because each of us are called forth at this moment to represent this important issue of housing. Yes. And so we ask that you just fill us with an impatient and passionate spirit, so that when folks see us and hear us, they know that we mean business and that we're about the business of that which is good, that which is right, and that which is needed. Don't let any of us get shaking knees, and don't let any of us get a spirit of cowardice. Let us all be filled with a spirit of determination so that justice can roll down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Each one of us here today, use us. Each one of us here today, give us the power and the passion to stand up and to be your people and say to all that need to hear, thus says the Spirit of truth, thus says the Spirit of justice, thus says the Spirit of righteousness. Hear our words, for we declare the truth and the power and the Spirit and the hope in the midst of this building, in the midst of this Wilson building, in the midst of this city hall. Anoint us, bless us, and send us forth, we pray. Amen. Amen. Amen.
To be outraged about DC General and our little girl that was over there. That's right. Yes. We need to get outraged, not non-violently, but we need to get outraged. How you doing?
But we will hear from the government, who will be represented by Maria K. Day Marshall, who's the interim executive director. So we're going to resume this hearing in about 5 minutes, where we will, let's just call it, we'll resume at 1:20, and we will begin to hear from members of the public. To review the mayor's budget proposals for several agencies within the Economic Development Committee's purview. Today we've heard from the Metropolitan Washington Transit Authority, as well as the Office of Cable Television. And now this section of the hearing will be devoted to the DC Housing Authority. It is currently 1:25 p.m. and we are located in room 412 in the John A. Wilson building. I have a list of people who have signed up to testify. If you haven't signed up, you may do so now, and then we will close the public testimony list, and anybody who comes in after that may submit written testimony. We currently have 43 witnesses. I would ask, because we are quite a number here, that if you have a cell phone, and you would be kind enough to put it on vibrate, which would be very helpful for us.
I'm the Senior Advocacy Advisor at SUM, which is also known as So Others Might Be. And as many of you know, SUM is an interfaith and nonprofit organization that for 43 years has provided comprehensive services to residents of the district who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. Our services include housing with individualized supportive services, and in fact, we currently house approximately 900 adults and 300 children. We recognized 9 years ago that the lack of affordable housing is driving more people into homelessness, so we started a housing development initiative to develop 1,000 net new units. The DC Housing Authority is an important partner in our housing development effort, and we're grateful for their partnership. As we testified in February, we were very pleased that the Housing Authority is one of 5 district agencies that entered into a memorandum of understanding and have issued a consolidated request for proposals. Using the funds available to them, whether through capital, operating support, or social services, Those 5 agencies will make it possible for developers such as some to produce affordable housing for extremely low income and other special needs residents. In the first consolidated RFP, the Housing Authority made available operating funds through the local rent supplement program. Project-based and sponsor-based LRSP helps developers to operate the buildings and pay back loans taken to begin development. These funds are essential because the tenants by law are extremely low income and cannot afford sufficient rents with which the buildings can be maintained. With LRSP, for operating support, the developers can leverage loans and other funds to make the housing possible and keep it available for residents to live in dignity. LRSP was initiated in fiscal year 2007 and has made possible housing for approximately 2,000 households to date. At Sun alone, we've been able to develop housing for approximately 380 adults and 290 children at 7 sites because of LRSP. As a member organization of the Coalition for Nonprofit Housing and Economic Development, we recommend that an additional $5 million be added to the FY15 budget for project-based, sponsor-based LRSP to make an additional 400 units or so if possible. Doing so will begin to reduce the housing pressures that are driving hundreds of families and individuals into homelessness. We also recommend that at least $2.5 million and possibly even $4.5 million be added to the budget to enable about 290 households, both singles and families, to obtain tenant-based LRSP vouchers. That will help relieve some of the extreme pressures in the homeless services system, which served more than 4,200 people on just one night this past winter, singles as well as families. Homeless persons in shelters have been waiting years for housing, and we had a huge increase of 800 priority one homeless families in the past hypothermia season. Our residents and residents of other programs have testified over the years about their gratitude for the program because it stabilizes them and helps them transform their lives. Some is grateful for the funds made available by the mayor and the council in the current fiscal year to start to address the long-term pressing need for affordable housing. We believe, and the ICH Permanent Support Capacity Committee believes, that an ongoing investment is essential to meet community needs and reduce other pressures on the public fisc caused by the lack of affordable housing. We're grateful for the funding in the proposed budget, and we hope that these recommendations for additional funding will be adopted so the district and its private partners can continue to address these needs on a more robust scale. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for your testimony. Reverend Hancock?
Good afternoon. It's both an honor to be here with many of these residents from public housing, and to be able to stand in solidarity with them and to be in partnership with the community. Because one of the things is that that is a serious crisis that is taking place in Washington, D.C. Housing should be a right. And we need to focus as leaders, as elected leaders, upon making sure that housing, decent and affordable housing, is a right, that people are not displaced from our city, but we can clearly develop the kind of web that allows people and families to stay in place. It's hard to think about all this prosperity that is going on around us, but at the same time we have an expanding homeless family population, expanding homeless population. We have public housing that continues to deteriorate and fall apart, and nobody seems to be focused on the repair of it. We have vacant housing units, public housing units, and nobody seems to be concerned too much about that. We're really engaged, it seems to me, and I think it seems to us, in a process of depopulating Washington, D.C. of certain people, and at the same time repopulating D.C. with another class of people. That's right. And we need to begin to focus upon that because that is a moral sin. It is not just a failure in judgment. It ends up being a moral sin when there is this kind of prosperity that is in a city, and yet we get further and further apart as the haves and the have-not. Now there needs to be expanded, subsidized and affordable housing. And our surplus, this surplus that we always brag about, it needs to be used and utilized to repair public housing, to expand affordability, to further subsidize families, to keep people in place, to not lose population from the city that have stayed here through thick and thin. Everybody deserves a decent
place to live, to raise their family, a place in which to develop a community and to continue to maintain that community. When we look at the news, and we talk about, for example, the tragedy, and sadly, the tragedy of Melissa Rudd. You know, the fact is that her school was closed where there was a community. And then she was put into D.C. General as a family shelter. At the same time, we had vacant units. And somebody needs to raise the question, how can we be so contradictory and hypocritical in our application of justice and fairness and trying to maintain a place where families can be together, where community can be together and to be nurtured. And clearly we're appealing to you and the committee to really have a broad focus, a broad vision, and to approach this with some boldness and to be justifiably radical as well in bringing about justice and hope in lives and also repairing the units that are in disrepair and making sure there's opportunity for families to be housed.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you. I first want to send my condolences to Aaron. My main reason for being here is because of the simple fact, you know, when it comes to the changes that's being made in housing, I've been a resident. I'm like a 6th generation resident of Washington D.C. and you know I have been in Washington. I've seen Washington D.C. change over many times. Right? And the one thing about the change that's being made in Washington D.C. now is I have a problem with is the simple fact, you know, it's changing for everybody but those that it is affecting. When it comes to those that are in public housing and those that are that have disabilities and whatnot that classify them to be under public housing, you know, it seems as though that the change that's being made is not for them. It's all about, you know, it's all about for the people that's coming into Washington and the people that's living in Washington. We basically be subject to the same things that we have been subjected to for years. And my thing is when it comes to the change that's being taken place in Washington, I don't have a problem with the change. I just want to be a part of the change. Because for one thing, I have seen Washington change from basically a war zone into a very livable, beautiful city. And you know, now when I walk on my front door, I don't have problems like I used to have in the past. You know, just walking the streets. In which that's why I say I really appreciate the change that's being made in Washington D.C. It's just that my thing is, and most of my affiliates' problem is that the changes that's being made are not for us; it's for other people. And while we are still under the same type of conditions that we have been living in Washington for the longest time. And matter of fact, I had a grandmother that when that lived on East Capitol, and when this changing first started, it basically started with the high-rise over there on East Capitol. And I really didn't know the type of damage that it caused until after the fact, but the simple fact is, you know, my grandmother, when they moved her from there, she was living in a senior citizens building. They moved her from a senior citizens building to a war zone, which was on 18th Minnesota Avenue. And from there, my grandmother deteriorated. And my thing is, my only thing that I'm basically really saying is, you know, is for the committee to take into consideration the effect that these changes is having on different families and children and households. And I thank you for hearing that.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Around the same time, and I spoke with Jim Grant, who referred me to a couple of people who referred me to Virginia Williams. In that process, I was referred to a landlord. I'm coming to find out the landlord was a slumlord. I was so desperate to say something and get me and my 16-year-old daughter into our home. I was willing to pay $8.50 for an efficiency, knowing I was only making a minimum wage. So they paid my first month's rent security deposit. They actually kind of threw me off from some of you. It was a program where they I can pay 60% of my rent, and I'll pay the other 40% for 6 months. That give me some time to establish some stability and build an estate for me and my daughter to fall back on at any given time, because I'm working a minimum wage job that I can lose it. So I went to the Clean Wings and hoped for my search. They told me I had 2 options. Like I said, I could either wait for a voucher, which they couldn't guarantee, or I can move into efficiency where they can help pay my first month's security deposit. Like I said, I was desperate, so I took it. It was very small. It was no more than 100 feet, especially for me and my daughter. And mind you, she's 16 years old. I was turned down from housing in 2012 due to the fact that I had an open case in court, which was later dismissed. So it's to the point where I've been working since I was 16. I've always paid taxes, so I don't understand why it's so hard for some people to get assistance. Now this is the point, my daughter's rebellion. Like I said, she's 16 years old. So she's to the point where we're living from house to house. We're in public housing with my mother, and she has to have that because really that's against her lease to have other people in her house that's not on her lease. And once I did move into that vacancy, I lost my job, so I was kicked out within a few months. I got in April of last year. I wound up getting kicked out in November. My landlord was terrible. I had videos that showed backup sinks, and my property was destroyed in my apartment due to the fact that it was flooding from the other person's apartment ahead of me. But that's what I was referred to by Virginia Williams. So these are the people that's supposed to help you and put you in a better situation. It wasn't that. They was really, the person that I know, she was just rude. She was deteriorating. Like I said, she was like, well, I don't know if it's a guarantee, so you will want to say something that you know. Knowing that I'm in a living situation that I don't want to be in with me and my daughter, of course I took it, which I shouldn't have, but I didn't know that it was going to be like that. So I ended up taking it and wound up to be in some more situation. And I'm back homeless with me and my daughter, and I still work. I'm making a minimum wage. I'm looking for a better job, but it's kind of hard due to the fact that I do have evictions on my credit report and on my rental history. It's really hard now to try to find housing at any given moment. We can be put out basically on the streets in the wintertime. We couldn't call that 1-800 number because they said it wasn't 30 degrees or below. So I just think that's ridiculous. I went to DC House, DC General for a couple of days. It was freezing in there. To the point, I was basically outside. That's how cold it was in there, with me and my daughter. So it just needs to be better. That's all.
And that there's a system in place to make that happen. So there's a big discussion around that too. And just like you said, we've been waiting for housing. We have a housing list, a wait list of tens of thousands of people. And we have hundreds of people and families who are on the very edge, who are close to living on the street, who are living in shelter. And so what the government has been trying to do is, we go down that list, or are we going to help the people who are right on the edge? So I think that most of us agree that we want to keep people from being on the street. So how we prioritize that and get those additional vouchers out is important. But your testimony hits on the crux of the problem. There's affordable units, but if you're right on the edge with your wages, or you have no wages, it's not affordable. So the answer to close that gap is through more supplement. And that is the whole purpose of what we're talking about today, to figure out how much more the government's going to do with supplement. So I want to thank you all for your testimony. Thank you for your testimony.
We represent as a whole senior citizens and work to defend and protect the rights of seniors age 60 and over in areas of housing, public benefits, and for protected arrangements such as graduation. According to U.S. Census data, by 2030, 1 in every 5 individuals will be 1 to 65 years old. And of all United States and territories, the District of Columbia has the highest percentage of seniors who live at or below the poverty line. For these seniors, aging in place is not only preferable, but also costs the government less on a daily basis. For example, Medicare reimbursement for a nursing facility would cost $428 versus $185 per cost. And given the large number of poor seniors in the district, and that this number will only grow as time passes, it is critical that we preserve and create affordable housing for elders. Therefore, the availability of safe and affordable housing for elderly tenants through the Housing Authority and legislation that promotes affordable, safe, and ample housing, such as proposed legislation B20-622, the Housing Assistance Program for Unsubsidized Seniors Act of 2013, is critical to the long-term well-being of our residents and our seniors. The Alternatives Project serves district seniors who are at risk of eviction due to their financial and health-related vulnerability. In this practice, we witness the impact that market rent places on seniors every day. Among elderly Social Security rent control, district seniors often have incomes that are very close to their rent, forcing them into a constant juggling act for food, utilities, and the rent. The solution to this problem for our residents on Social Security is a robust housing authority that can create new units and assist seniors that need subsidies to get them. With a waiting list, the district already has shown leadership on this issue, that we have 45 units for every 100 people who needs them. It's much better than the rest of the country, who averages about 29 people getting housing for every 100 people who need it. However, 45% remains a failing grade when most of us went to school. That's why legislation such as the Housing Assistance Program for Seniors Act of 2013, which would provide $5 million to market rent seniors in the district, is a critical first step, but much more remains to be done. Thank you for your time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Padilla? Mr. Padilla's not here. Ms. Padilla?
Good afternoon, Councilman Bowser, staff, and citizens. My name is Claudette Bethea, and I'm an advocate living in Hillcrest Heights in Southeast DC. I want to begin by asking why there is no money in the DC budget to support public housing. Why also are there units that HUD has refused to upgrade? I myself utilized public housing as a young mother. It was a blessing. Another girlfriend of mine raised her children in public housing. We all worked and we were able to live. I ask that you renovate the vacant units, fund and complete needed repairs, move low-income residents into available units, and immediately stop the demolition of public housing. Let me also add that Section 8 vouchers are needed. Local rent supplement program needs to be fully funded. All the housing programs are needed. It still does not meet the demand for affordable housing, but it's all we have for right now. Thank you, Councilman Bowser, and may God be blessed.
Mr. Warren?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Councilman Bowser. My name is Robert Warren. I'm a member of the People Fairness Coalition, which is an advocacy group that's been here in Washington, D.C. for the last 6 years, advocating for affordable housing for low-income residents in Washington, D.C. I'm also part of SHARP, that stands for Shelter Housing Expected Change, which is advocating for affordable housing to be built down on the grounds of CCNB. I'm also a lifelong DC resident and also a part of public housing. And I just don't understand how it is that the mayor of the city said that he doesn't believe in the local voucher program, that he thinks that it builds dependency. And I would ask the chair, does she also agree with that? Because when you talk about your support of new communities, we have to start supporting all communities, people who have been here all their lives. The houses that they need. I told you this about 3 or 4 times.
Because I can't see my witnesses.
Housing, and you're not giving people the housing that they need. Give people vouchers. Then let them move wherever they want to, whether it be What's that place you just built in the middle of DC? When you put 3 million, 500, $3 million for condos to live in the middle of our city for rich white folks? Whoa! And that's all y'all want to support is the new white folks to move into Washington, D.C. and to provide everything for them and don't care anything about the residents who've been here all their lives? It's wrong. And God is going to punish a lot of you. And me personally, I'm glad you won the election, but I'm sorry, Ms. Bowles, you cannot have my vote. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, you may proceed.
So I just want to talk a little bit about my remembrance of public housing. The state of public housing goes back to the 1930s. Me, my father, and his father grew up there. So does that count for something, or does it count for nothing? My elementary school, Brother James, who owned a local store, my mom's 2 sisters and her kids, they all lived there. So does that count for something, or does it count for nothing? All those community friends, playground basketball tournament, the little tiny recreation center, they all were right there. So does that count for something, or does it count for nothing? Our grandmamas, that 1980 Cadillac Coupe de Ville, Memorial Day and Labor Day barbecues, and all those painted numbers on the front door steps, they're all still there. So do they count for something, or do they count for nothing? So when we fall asleep, or when we think deep about the public housing model, so have we reached out to the community people to measure if public housing is a successful model? And if we haven't, we should. And lastly, I stand by Empower DC to fund $50 million to resurrect public housing.
Yeah.